Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up a basic on-off type of output with our Motec M1 systems. Now, basic on-off control can be broken down into two separate types, a low and a high side style control. We're going to go talk about some of the basics with this, also talking about how we need to wire in a relay between our Motec and the device we're trying to control if the amp draw coming from the device is going to be too great for the Motec to sync. We're going to get into those details here as we go through the tutorial. Let's first jump in here and take a look at setting up a cooling fan in a basic on-off format and go through some of these details, and such as a low and high side output and then wiring in a relay between the Motec and that fan, because we will find that there's going to be likely too great of an amp draw to go ahead and sync the fan amperage in order to turn on that circuit from the Motec directly. So first things first, let's jump over here in our workbook I provided with a training course. We're gonna move down here into setup, and then I'm gonna jump over here into all calibrate. Under the all calibrate area, we can go ahead and type in here either cooling fan, or we can go down here into coolant, and we can just go ahead and start to go through our navigation window in here. So the first thing we have to go in here is gonna be our fan 1, and then we're gonna go to our output resource for assignment. Now we need to know where we are going to wire our fan control into. In this case, I have wired my fan control to a low side style output that's available on my M150. I have a lot of options in order to choose different output resources depending on where I want to wire my fan to, but I need to consider how I'm controlling this fan. Now my particular fan has an onrush of about 40 amps and then continuous amperage about 20 to 22 amps, and I've measured this beforehand. In this situation, none of the outputs from the Motec can directly drive and sync that fan. If I try to drive that fan directly, I'm going to damage my Motec. So in this situation, I need to wire in a relay between the fan and the Motec to handle that amperage draw and to handle that switching function. So what we're going to find here is that we need to consider how we're wiring our fan to decide what type of output we're going to be using, and then we also need to consider how we're going to be setting up our relay based around that specific pin that we're going to go ahead and assign here from our output resource. So let's break this down real quickly here. So the first thing coming up on our screen, this is going to help us understand a high and low side output choice. Now a high side output is simply going to be a 12 volt out when we want to turn a device on. Now we only are able to choose in our output resource menu here, if we're going to be choosing a high side out or sending a 12 volt out, a half bridge type of output. The half bridge allows us to send either a high side 12 volt out or a low side output out of our half bridge. Now the low side is going to be the opposite of a high side. Instead of sending a 12 volt out, we're going to be go ahead and sending a ground out from that specific pin. So the half bridge are unique, where they can do both low and high side. We do find that we have other options here, our peak and hold injector drivers, so any spare injector drivers that we have, or any other low side saturated style injector drivers or coil drivers, we're able to reassign those for a general on-off type of purpose. Now some things about this, some specific things about this we need to know. The half bridge, as I mentioned before, is able to sync both high and low side. In the low side format, we're only able to sync up to 12 amps. In the high side format, we're only able to sync up to 9 amps. Any of our other low side options, so the peak and hold or the low side saturated injector output or the ignition coil output, those are only able to sync up to 3.5 amps. So much less amperage syncing capability through our other general low side outputs. Now, because my fan is going to be drawing up to about 20 amps continuous as it runs, I cannot use any of these outputs without putting a relay between the fan and the Motec. So you're going to find yourself probably in that situation, unless you're running a PDM module from Motec, and you're going to be assigning a CAN byte address to the PDM module, and then you're going to be using an output from the PDM module to be able to drive that fan directly. Now with the PDM module, you either have 8 amp or 20 amp continuous output types that we can choose and work with. We can also set up our PDM 2 outputs to assign to drive the same device in parallel that can then double up to give us 40 total amps of control for that output. So depending on how you're configuring this, you'll be choosing these different options. Now we're going to be wiring things directly to the Motec, so that's going to be covering here in this training module. So we're going to have to choose one of our outputs. So in this situation, I'm going to be choosing a half bridge output to control that fan.
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.